Good evening. Welcome to News Plus here on Loveworld USA. I'm TGK Andre.
And I'm Barbara Sam. Let's take a quick look at the top headline stories this evening. House Republicans unveil stopgate measure to prevent government shutdown amid Democratic opposition. Trump clarifies limits on Elon Musk's role in government efficiency efforts. U.S. Department of Education unveils NDEI portal to combat discrimination in schools. Maine lawmaker censored after refusing to apologize for transgender athlete comments. These and more stories in the news. House Republicans have introduced a stopgate measure aimed at averting a government shutdown with a vote expected next week. The proposed 99-page continuing resolution, CR, would fund the government through September, securing vital resources for national defense, veterans' health care, and immigration and customs enforcement, while reducing non-defense spending between 2024 levels. The legislation follows a partisan clash as House Speaker Mike Johnson and Republicans work to secure the necessary votes to pass the bill, especially from hardline conservatives who have long opposed stopgap measures on principle. The continuing resolution is expected to face significant opposition from Democrats, who have signaled their resistance due to concerns over cuts to health care, nutrition assistance, and veterans' benefits. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump weighed in on the proposed CR, praising the Republican effort and urging party unity. On social media, the president called the bill a very good funding plan and expressed confidence that the GOP could deliver a successful vote. Democrats will do anything they can to shut down our government, and we can't let that happen, he said on Truth Social. President Trump's support is seen as critical for rallying Republican lawmakers, particularly hardliners who are weary of temporary funding measures. These conservatives have long demonstrated great fiscal discipline and transparency in federal spending. During a recent White House meeting, President Trump emphasized that CR was necessary to avoid a shutdown and prevent Democrats from using the situation to push their own agenda. Representative Chip Roy of Texas, a conservative stalwart, said that the CR would freeze spending for 6 months, allowing Republicans to address waste and fraud through transparency initiatives like the DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, a concept championed by Trump advisor Elon Musk. Democratic opposition focused on health care and tax cuts. Democratic leaders, however, strongly opposed the stopgap measure, calling it partisan and a threat to critical social programs. In a statement released Friday, House Democratic leaders, including Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Whip Catherine Clark, and Caucus Chair Pete Aguilar, expressed concerns about cuts to health care and other social services. Republicans have chosen to put Social Security, Medicare, Veterans Health, and Medicaid on the chopping block to pay for billionaire tax cuts, they wrote. We cannot back a measure that rips away life-sustaining health care and retirement benefits from everyday Americans. They also criticized the bill's provision as disproportionately benefiting wealthy individuals like Elon Musk, arguing that it would exacerbate the already widening inequality gap. We are voting no, they concluded, signaling the deep partisan divide over government funding. Uncertain path forward in the Senate should the CR pass in the House. It faces an uphill battle in the Senate. With the Republicans holding a 53-seat majority, the bill will require at least 7 Democrat votes to secure approval. Some Senate Democrats, including Senator Patty Murray, have already voiced their opposition, calling the bill a slush fund that would give Trump and Musk more control over federal spending. She suggested that lawmakers should instead work on passing shorter-term funding measures and finalize new funding bills. Conservative agenda and fiscal responsibility as the deadline for government funding looms on March 14th. House Republicans are positioning themselves as defenders of fiscal responsibility by focusing on defense spending and targeting cuts to non-defense programs. Republicans aim to balance national security priorities with the need to curb wasteful spending. For conservatives, the CR represents an important step in preventing national defense while preventing a government shutdown and protecting taxpayers from unnecessary expenditures. The debate over the stopgate measures reflect ongoing tensions between Republicans and Democrats over government spending, social programs, and the role of government in the lives of American citizens. As the vote approaches, all eyes will be on how Republicans and Democrats navigate these critical issues with the potential for significant consequences for the 2025 election cycle. Watch this.
A spending bill that would avoid a government shutdown before next Friday's deadline. The measure would keep the government funded through September the 30th. Republican leadership says that it would increase defense spending and include cuts to domestic programs. Johnson hopes to hold the vote on the bill this Tuesday. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has strongly opposed that measure. Instead, he wants to work on negotiating a long-term deal.
There's a lot. DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, is really cracking down and providing transparency across the board. And we can see that Democrats are not happy about this.
Very much so. And of course, with the resolution that Congress is trying to pass to avoid another government shutdown, an important thing to note about government shutdowns is the fact that when the government is shut down, and if you don't know, the government typically is shut down at least once a year for the past ongoing decade or so, it's almost become a normal thing where you have the left and the right argue, and then all of a sudden there's a government shutdown that everybody's panicking about. However, both the left and the right do understand that there's a deadline, because pretty much what they do is that they kick the can further down the road. The whole mentality is, well, we'll cross this bridge when we get to it. But that March 14th deadline is a result of them trying to cross the bridge as they've gotten to it. But what they don't understand is that there are lives hanging on the bridge.
Yeah.
Because whenever the government is shut down, it means that federal workers don't receive pay. And being a federal worker doesn't just mean that you work in the White House or you work in the Senate or you work as a representative. It means postal service workers.
Right.
It means workers who work, cafeteria workers in the Capitol building.
Yes.
At the
IRS.
Exactly, at the IRS, at any federal institution, they don't get paid.
Yeah.
And that goes on as long as the government, is currently non-functional. So you have to put those people into perspective, because while you have people arguing about how many trillions or billions are going to go into tax cuts, how much you're going to raise the debt ceiling, of course, what other slush funding you can put into bills to prop it up and still get it passed, you have people, especially in a political and economic climate, who are just trying to get by and make a living and go home to their families, who are now concerned because, hey, fortunately it's the 14th. For most people,
it's very soon.
It is very soon, but hopefully they would have some of their bills taken care of, because the way it goes, they don't know if they're being paid bi-weekly. That's literally halfway in the month. They don't know if they're going to see that second paycheck at the end of the month. At the time. So it's one of those things where it's good to sometimes humanize the situation, because you can talk all these big numbers, billions of dollars here and there, but then you also have to look at it from a ground level.
Right.
Because people's lives are at stake here. And of course, that doesn't go to excuse the fact that, when bills like this come out, different sides like to try and add in these different clauses and caveats to get it past as an overarching thing, which is where a lot of the breakdown comes into play with. But I wanted to take a step away from that and just demonstrate how this also affects regular human lives beyond the pale of just affecting the overarching government. Because me and you, we don't work for the government.
No.
So if the government shuts down on the 14th, the checks are still coming in.
Right.
But there are thousands of people, and of course, Doge is reducing that number daily, but there are still tens of thousands of people who are employed by the federal government who are very concerned about this. And those people deserve the proper care and attention, especially since they work for the government.
I agree. Well, say it. Great insight, TGK.
Thank you. Thank you. President Donald Trump convened his cabinet to clarify the role of Elon Musk in the Department of Government Efficiency in the administration's ongoing efforts to restructure the federal government. The meeting, which was attended by Musk himself, followed growing concerns within the administration about Musk's expanding influence, particularly after a series of high-profile firings across federal agencies. According to multiple administration officials, Trump stressed that while Musk is empowered to make recommendations and offer guidance, the final decisions on policy and staffing must remain in the hands of the cabinet secretaries. Musk, who heads Doge, acknowledged this distinction and indicated his agreement, with a directive admitting that the department had made some missteps in recent weeks. The meeting came after weeks of controversy surrounding Doge's aggressive stance on cutting federal jobs, which included mass terminations of government workers across various agencies. This has led to legal challenges and backlash from both Democrats and Republicans who argue that the firings may have violated civil service protections. In particular, the actions were criticized after a federal judge and the Civil Service Board chair concluded that many terminations appeared unrelated to performance and might have contravened existing laws. In his post-meeting statement, Trump assured reporters that while he still advocated for cuts to reduce inefficiencies, he wanted to maintain capable federal workers. He emphasized that the goal was not to indiscriminately purge government employees, but to focus on precision, with his administration aiming for a more targeted approach to removing wasteful spending rather than implementing a broad brush strategy. Musk's role within Doge has been part of a point of contention, particularly following Trump's address to Congress, where he described Musk as the head of Doge. This description directly contradicted the White House's earlier stance, which asserted that Musk did not hold independent authority to make policy decisions without Senate confirmation. Legal experts and courts are now grappling with how to reconcile these differing representations, which could have significant implications for the future of Doge's work. Let's take a look.
We're ranked at the bottom of the list.
U.S. President Donald Trump told his cabinet members on Thursday that they, not Elon Musk, have the final say on staffing and policy at their agencies. That's according to a source familiar with the matter, who also said Musk was in the room and told the cabinet he was good with playing an advisory role only, per the president's plan. Here's Trump after the meeting.
I want the cabinet members go first, keep all the people you want, everybody that you need. And we want them to keep the good people. And so we're going to be watching them, and Elon and the group are going to be watching them. And if they can cut, it's better. And if they don't cut, then Elon will do the cutting.
The meeting was called following complaints from agency heads to top White House officials about the blunt force approach of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which Musk heads. Under the billionaire's direction, DOGE has cut more than 100,000 employees from the 2.3 million strong federal workforce in a matter of weeks. More than 30 lawsuits have already been filed by unions and other advocacy groups challenging DOGE's actions. In some cases, the government has scrambled to rehire critical staffers in areas such as nuclear weapons security and bird flu research. Thursday marks Trump's first notable public effort to restrain Musk. But when asked if Musk had moved too fast with Doge, Trump said he did not think so, and that Musk is teaching everybody how to cut costs.
No, I think they've done an amazing job. They've done an amazing job.
After the meeting, Trump on Truth Social doubled down on the importance of retaining valuable staff, saying, quote, "It's very important that we cut levels down to where they should be, but it's also important to keep the best and most productive people," and vowing to use the, quote, "scalpel" rather than the hatchet in future cuts.
And I mean, this is something we have to say because on this program, when the controversies about Elon Musk being head of Doge were brought up, we did clarify, and the president did clarify, and of course it's beautiful that he's going to clarify again what he said, but weeks ago, we did mention that he said that Elon Musk does not have the final say, he does. And if anything, Elon Musk is being treated like a special advisor to the president, of course with his pay being deferred. But it's good, because again, we stated that this was a divisive tactic by the media to try and separate and, cause division between him and President Trump. Because we're going to try to give Elon more power than Trump had stated. Although he had stated it specifically to avoid this kind of issue. But it's good to see the president being proactive before, the situation comes to a head, bringing Elon before the cabinet to clarify.
Right.
And of course, with the public media also being there and him stating it publicly, nobody can feign ignorance. Oh, well, we're not sure what stance the president has on Elon Musk because he clarified it.
Right.
And if you didn't get it because he spoke it, he also wrote it on Truth Social. So either you want to hear it or you want to read it, it's there, for verification. Elon does not have government responsibility to cause any firings.
Right.
He brings up recommendations which have to be approved by the cabinet, which ultimately will be approved by the president. And if you're the head of the cabinet and you don't want to cut anybody, you still have to take that up with the president, and then they'll see, okay, how many people can we keep? And of course, like the president said, going through a scalpel procedure rather than a broad brush approach, which is typically common, in the tech workforce. It's very common to, we're having a downturn. We're going to fire 10,000 employees. Just find 10,000 employees that we can get rid of, and we'll do it like that. And like Elon has said, he is kind of trying to take the government and run it like a tech business. Well, not run it, but, influence it like a tech business where he's like, he did admit, and it's kind of interesting to see this government admitting the mistakes that they made so readily. He admitted that they cut, I believe it was for the Ebola program, that they cut part of the NIH was responsible for the Ebola program, but they hired them back, I think, about after a week after they realized that they were actually necessary. So it's kind of like, a brute force approach. Let me, again, nerd out a bit. Where instead of, instead of them trying to, and when I say brute force, it means that if somebody was trying to hack into something, instead of them, trying to cut through the corners, they would try to go over the wall or hop over the fence or, go through the
trenches.
The trenches. They're going to come and pound at your door until the lock breaks. Yeah. Pretty much. And then if there's any issues, they fix it afterwards. Most important thing is just getting in and making a change. So it's interesting to see, but it's also good to see the clarification and them also being willing to admit that, well, if we remove so many people, that's wrong. We shouldn't do it like that. It truly speaks to the transparency that this Trump administration has been working to provide.
Yeah, I think their action was too swift in terminating so many government employees. I think that, as you said, it should have been just a short dig and dive into, okay, let's identify what areas are not really that efficient or what areas where we've been seeing a lot of wasteful spending, and try to cut back on those programs, cut back on those departments instead of having this broad sweep of firing, because now we see it's a regret. I also think that the Democrats and some of the media has taken this and spun it in a different, their own story, their own way. So we'll see how this comes and how it plays out. It's good that they were able to have this press conference for President Trump to acknowledge in front of everyone, it's myself and also the committees that have the final vote and the final say, not Elon Musk. But of course, that's all we've been seeing is Elon is doing this, Elon is doing that.
Because that's what the media wants to show,
right. So, yeah, this is really great. And I'm happy that things are really starting to come to just some type of understanding, because as we, just spoke about, a lot of people, their jobs are on the line, their livelihoods are on the line. So we definitely want to see an uptick in this.
Very much so. And of course, it's good to see that President Trump, the cabinet members, and, Elon are being so gung-ho about fixing the country. I mean, I'll never forget Elon Musk speaking on the podcast, on the Joe Rogan show. He was speaking about how, America could be facing bankruptcy, and he's going to do everything in his power to not make that happen.
Right.
So when I see these approaches, I remember the words that he spoke months ago, and I understand it. Because, as a businessman, as a tech man,
right.
We've seen what he's done with
Tesla.
SpaceX, Tesla with SpaceX, where, of course, respectfully, they had a Starship, explode over the Bahamas recently.
Right. We
But-
reported on that earlier this week.
Exactly. But of course, I mean, in that, he's still going to go build another one. We're going to figure out what went wrong. We're going to go build another one. Where so you can see that approach of, hey, we have to get this right as soon as possible. Like I said before, we're going to try and brute force through it. I'm not going to let you take 8 months to tinker with these devices. Let's make a few tweaks, get it out.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, bring it back, we'll retool it, and we'll go out again. So it's interesting to see that approach, but it's also easier to understand it because we've seen him do it before. So it's not like a madman that's just coming in and saying, you're fired, which is ironically President Trump's famous catchphrase.
From the reality show,
from
The Apprentice.
So it's easier to swallow that pill when you see that, okay, the successful companies that he's raised have a track record of going after things very aggressively rather than trying to fine-tune it. And that's what he's trying to do with the government, it seems.
Keep in mind, he can't run the government like he runs his tech companies. It's two different entities. So he needs to really understand that it's different. You can't run business like you run the government. I understand incorporating some business fundamentals and how just applying some of those principles to the government so it's more efficient, but you can't run it like your tech companies. In a significant move aimed at addressing concerns over race and sex-based discrimination in schools, the U.S. Department of Education has launched an End DEI portal. This new initiative provides a platform for parents, students, and teachers to report instances of discriminatory practices in public-funded K-12 schools across the nation. The department says the portal is a vital step in ensuring that schools focus on providing meaningful education, free from the influence of divisive ideologies, and aims to investigate complaints of discrimination related to race or sex. According to a spokeswoman for the Department of Education, the portal gives parents an opportunity to have their concerns addressed directly by the federal government, particularly for those whose complaints about discriminatory practices have previously gone unheeded. The initiative is in line with the broader goals of the Trump administration, which has sought to eliminate what it calls the harmful impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI programs in educational institutions. The NDEI portal enables individuals to submit reports that detail instances where sex or race-based decisions have impacted students' education. The Department of Education intends to review these submissions, identify areas of concern, and launch investigations where necessary to ensure that educational environments are free from discriminatory ideologies. The department has emphasized that race or sex-based decisions in school settings are unlawful, and such practices could risk schools losing federal funding. The NDEI portal is part of a broader federal effort to address race-based decision-making in schools. The Department of Education is working to ensure that federal funding is not used to perpetuate practices they deem discriminatory, reinforcing the message that such practices are not only harmful to students, but also unlawful under existing civil rights laws. The launch of the NDEI portal is likely to reignite the ongoing debate about the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in U.S. schools. The Department of Education has said it will carefully review reports submitting via the portal and work to ensure that the nation's educational institutions remain focused on delivering high-quality, equitable education to all students, regardless of their race or sex, without being influenced by outside political agendas. Let's take a look.
The new portal
is a step in the right direction to restoring parental rights in education, to restoring the parents being in charge of what the children are being taught.
Parents, educators, and students can submit the name of a school or school district and detail the practices they deem concerning.
Our children have been exposed to all of this divisive content, all of this critical theory, this toxic curriculum, and parents have had to endure that, have had to watch our children be exposed to it without our consent or knowledge, and that stops now.
This website comes after President Trump signed an executive order that will block federal funding for schools that don't end DEI practices. The Department of Education also sent a letter on February 14th to schools nationwide, directing them to stop using racial preferences in things like admissions, financial aid, and hiring, or face investigation and loss of federal funding.
There's a 5-alarm fire right now in Washington, D.C.
Randy Weingarten and the American Federation of Teachers are suing the Education Department over this order. And a group of Democrats is calling on the administration to rescind threats of defunding schools with DEI programs. DEI advocates, such as author Dante King, believe the administration is putting forth these orders to help white Americans over minorities.
DEI in the school system, DEI across companies, universities, this is a very critical issue and subject because in public schools are open to any race, any class, but private schools, you have to pay to attend them. And so some of the DEI initiatives in private schools have allowed low-income parents or students attend those private schools with like federal funding, such as grants, federal aid, also known as financial aid, as well as colleges as well. A lot of students have received financial aid from federal funding, and that's based on economic status, not necessarily race or sex. So this is interesting how this has ended up across public schools, private schools, as well as universities.
Very much so. I mean, one of the things that you'll hear from a lot of people, especially a lot of people coming into America, seeking, to enter America for greener pastures, is that they typically say that America is a land of opportunity.
Yeah. And
one of the beauties of having that opportunity in America means that, unlike certain other places in the world, you are judged based on merit. Like the great Martin Luther King Jr. said, that he has a dream one day, that, in the future, people will be judged by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. And to, I guess, kind of add on to that, because of course it's important to mention that when you're mentioning DEI, is that, as well as the content of their character, I feel like a little addendum to that would also be to, to judge people, of course, in merit. And I'm not saying that America has the best history of judging people in merit, because there was no merit to classify a human being as 3/5 of another human being. But now that we're in this state that we are in America, it's important to note that just for the best of the country, you want the best of the best. You want the brightest of the brightest, and you want the smartest of the smartest. So when I look at these DEI measures, I note that it's important because, of course, there were times where people were rejected for, the color of their skin.
Yeah. It still happens this day.
That's a great point. It definitely still happens to this day, but it's important, and it's important, and I believe that most people, especially those people who, a lot of people believe that DI benefits, would rather get in, especially if you really deserve to be there.
Right.
You would rather get in based on merit, meaning that you were just better, rather than getting in because there was a diversity quota to fill. Because then it means that it wasn't your hard work that got you there. It wasn't your talent. It wasn't your academic intellect that got you there. There was a quota that they needed to fill, and you would help check that box so they got you in.
Well, maybe it was part of it, because if it's admissions into a school and they have to fill a certain quota based on race, then what if they didn't have that DEI, program in place? Will they allow certain type of people based on their demographics in that program or in that school? So it's kind of, it's good and bad. It's a counteractive type of policy, especially in a corporate workplace. There are companies that only had a small population or small percentage of diverse or ethnic or, different ethnicities within the corporation, because DEI, it opened them and forced them to hire more people of color. If that program wasn't in place, would they have been able to hire more people of color because they weren't forced to, because there was no DEI in place?
That's very much a good question. So now it means that we have to turn the issue to whether DEI should become a federally or society protected thing versus just, again, going back to getting, well, let me not say going back, because there's been a history in this country of people being rejected on merit. I mean, for example, you know, you look at the the women who were instrumental in one of the very first space launches, right?
Okay.
And the
Many
work
decades ago.
yeah, many decades ago, and the work that they had to do, you know, to be able to get those calculations properly. You know, by merit, they should have been hired and paid what they deserved, but it didn't happen.
Oh, there was a movie about them, Hidden Figures, I think that's.
I believe you're right.
Scientists, yes.
I very much believe you're right. So in that situation, it's important that, you know, that is what, if anything should be rectified, it should be that we're rectifying that, okay, they wouldn't have gotten in because of the color of their skin. They would have gotten in because of the quality of their minds.
Right.
So the utmost priority should be that, hey, if your mind is the sharpest, we want you.
Right.
So it should actually be about ending discrimination,
Yes.
right, rather than trying to promote diversity. Because if you're trying to promote diversity, you're only papering over the cracks. Because somebody can then say, okay, well, I wouldn't hire you under any circumstance, but we have a DI quota to meet for our social and corporate responsibility. So here you go. It doesn't mean that they think of you any higher. It just means that, hey, I mean, I have a fiduciary duty that I have to fulfill, and I'm going to fulfill it along with my social, you know, and corporate goals. The real work actually needs to be in saying, hey, you are the brightest of the brightest. I want you independent of your race, independent of your social, political, or socioeconomic background.
Right.
That is what we should be focusing on. And my hope is that that's what this administration and their attack on DEI is actually focusing on, the idea that it should be purely based on merit and nothing else. Because truly, you know, all we want is the best of the best. But we also don't want the best to be denied for any other reason. So then it means that there's also a gap in seeing how you can also advocate and adjudicate that these companies and that these places of education are also strictly taking the best of the best.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
There's been a boycott within the past couple of weeks across the United States, boycotting Target. You know why they boycotted Target? One of the largest stores, box stores, chain stores here in America, because they removed a lot of products and a lot of businesses, small businesses and brands from their stores because of their dissolvement in the DEI program within the company.
And honestly, that's part of the issue. And that's one of the things that grind my gears, because a lot of people would then try to point that to the Trump administration. But the thing is, it means that to all of the, you know, of course, the successful, you know, minority business owners who are there, it means that these people did not see your product as valuable. I mean, they only did it to have you as a token DEI representation. And once the need for that was gone, they did away with you. So if anything, I would be more offended at the fact that, you know, that, well, okay, I had my items there, but not because DEI is gone, it's gone. Meaning that I was only there to make up the numbers, to fill up a quota, which is part of what the deeper issue is. Because if that item was high selling or promoted the way it was supposed to be, and the item was doing well, I mean, per fiduciary duty, you would want to keep those items, you would want to keep those initiatives going. So the focus truly has to be on emphasizing to those who benefited from DEI that you have to, by any means, and of course, you know, by any, you know, wise means, make sure that your value is seen.
You said something very important. You said that company, Target, didn't value those businesses. That's why they removed their products from the shelves. So. These are brands that have been a part of, you know, this company, or their products were in the stores for several years. So I think that was the main reason for the boycott, because you didn't value this product or brand. And that's why we're boycotting, because you only had them in place because of this DEI initiative. And once the initiative is no longer required, you don't value this brand. So we're not going to spend dollars with you. So, yeah, that's the key.
Good point. Good point. Maine State Representative Laurel Libby has been censured by the Democratic majority in the Maine House of Representatives after she refused to apologize for posting an image of a transgender female athlete who had recently won the state championship in women's pole vaulting after competing in the men's division just 1 year prior. The censure passed in a narrow 75-70 vote on Tuesday night, has sparked a heated debate on transgender athletes' participation in women's sports, particularly in high school athletics. Libby, a Republican representative from Bangor, voiced strong opposition to the inclusion of transgender women in girls' sports, arguing that it undermines the fairness of competitions and disadvantages cisgender female athletes. Her comments drew widespread criticism from Democrats and advocates for transgender rights, who accused her of promoting harmful rhetoric against transgender individuals. After the censure vote, Libby stated that she would not apologize for her remarks and instead vowed to explore legal options, claiming the censure violated her constitutional rights. The censure has divided the state's political landscape, with Republicans criticizing the vote as an overreach and an attempt to silence opposition to the inclusion of transgender athletes. In women's sports, state Republicans, including Libby, argue that transgender women have a physical advantage over cisgender women, particularly in athletic competitions, and that this undermines the integrity of women's sports. In addition to the censure, Libby has become a focal point in the ongoing national debate over transgender rights and the fairness of sports competitions. The Maine GOP, along with organizations like Moms for Liberty, have called for policy changes at the state level, urging Democratic lawmakers to reconsider their stance on transgender athletes in women's sports. Libby, in her refusal to apologize, is also at odds with Maine's Democratic governor, Janet Mills, who has publicly opposed federal mandates on transgender participation in high school sports. A spokesperson for Maine's Attorney General confirmed that the U.S. Department of Education has formally issued a notice of violation against Maine for allowing transgender women to compete in women's sports in defiance of a Trump administration executive order mandating an end to this practice. As part of the notice, the state was warned that it could face a significant loss of federal education funding, with estimates suggesting that Maine's public education system stands to lose millions in federal dollars. State Rep. Libby and other Republicans argue that Maine's Democratic leadership must reverse its policy to avoid jeopardizing funding for public schools. In response to the mounting pressure, Democrats have pushed back, with Governor Mills maintaining that the state's policy aligns with Maine's commitment to inclusion and that no federal executive order will dictate the terms of equality in state laws. With the censure now in place, Libby's ability to participate in legislative matters has been temporarily suspended, and she will not be allowed to speak on the House floor or vote. However, her determination to continue challenging the state's policy signals a broader ideological struggle that is unfolding in Maine and across the country. Watch this.
And when the woke left can't silence women, they cancel them.
A fierce debate in the Maine legislature as a lawmaker is disciplined for a viral social media post.
I think it will be very clear that the standard is to not post photos of minors as part of political fodder.
On Tuesday, the Maine House of Representatives moving to censure Republican State Representative Laurel Libby for sharing images and the name of a transgender high school athlete in Maine. The lawmaker criticizing the teenager's victory in a girls' track and field event.
Boys participating in girls' sports is not fair.
Libby receiving strong support from her own party against the censure.
She's actually practicing freedom of speech and standing up for girls in Maine.
With one GOP lawmaker drawing scrutiny for his language.
People maybe should have thought about approaching the good representative before we do a lynching.
The member will defer.
During debate, Democrats offering a fierce rebuke of the lawmaker from Auburn.
No child designed these rules, and no child deserves to be targeted by any adults who are upset about them.
That stance drawing support from Republican Ken Fredette, though he ultimately urged his colleagues to reject the censure.
Photos, images, statements of somebody else's children to make a point. I think that's dead wrong.
Gender dysphoria on a pedestal. And
The clash between House Democrats and their Republican counterparts coming to a head as the censure passed, and Speaker Ryan Fecteau invited Libby to the front of the chamber to apologize for the post. She declined.
This is one of those issues where you have to look at the broader whole, and I believe earlier on this platform we also spoke about DJ Daniels, and the one thing that I will state is that, of course, this is a minor that's being posted.
Yeah.
Which just, I mean, in any and most situations is very much below the belt.
I agree.
The same way that, I mean, there were people making fun of DJ Daniels, of course, the 13-year-old with terminal cancer, who was appointed as an honorary Secret Service worker, is the same way that when you have a transgender athlete, unlike the transgender athlete from Maine, with her being a minor, she should stay out of it because at the end of the day, she's not 18.
Right.
She can't vote to keep transgender athletes in sports or vote to keep them out. You know, so of course, the representative, Libby from Maine, speaks for everybody, including her, but at the same time, she can't be the focal point of contention.
Right.
Because she's not old enough to vote, you know, in the board elections, you know, in the school board elections,
Right.
in the city elections, and in the state elections.
Any election.
Exactly, in any election. So she wouldn't have the power to even put somebody like Janet Mills into place to support her cause.
Right.
If you want to go after somebody, you have to go after the people who are making these laws and allowing these things to happen. Going after somebody who technically is a victim of the space being created by having a governor like Janet Mills, who of course was in the news controversially last month when all the governors met with President Trump in the White House. He was one of the governors who stood up to the president when he talked about, you know, the violation of them, you know, refusing to follow federal law concerning Title IX and, of course, you know, men and women's sports. She stood up boldly and said that they weren't going to support that. Those are the people that you have to target because they create the room for somebody, you know, like the athlete, you know, from a man to go and enter a woman's sport. And in going after minority instead, although I understand the heart that Libby's coming from, has no place, especially in politics. Barbara, what do you think?
I think it's wrong. She should have kept the image and the student's name out, as you said, because she is a minor. So you should never post any type of images or names because now she can be a target for bullying. She can be a target for so many different things within that community and just across the country. You know, with social media, people can come directly to her social media pages, to her family's page, and do anything, even cause harm to her. So no, that information should have not been displayed. However, you know, President Trump stated in his inaugurational speech and also during the beginning of his new term that there's only two genders. There's male and female. And so...
So when you're referring to the athlete, you're referring to the he, as they are a transgender athlete.
He was born a he, okay? And he should not compete in women's sports as a transgender. You mentioned that this student is under 18. They should not even have the opportunity to make those type of decisions on their gender until a certain age, right? Competing in women's high school sports, as a man, you already have so many different advantages that comes with you biologically to just, you know, win over that woman or those young girls competitively. So it's wrong. And like you said, it's the lawmakers that need to fight to change and make the decisions to come back to what this country was before this Democratic previous administration put these policies in place.
Very much so. And of course, my thing with this will always be the fact that I'm never going to attack a child or a child who believes something because children are owed a debt of responsibility by adults. So if you have a child who's doing something wrong, you can't look at the child specifically. You have to look at the adults in the situation, even past the parents, the adults in society.
Right.
Because of course, the idea that they came from, I mean, a child doesn't just wake up and have a novel idea of, you know, of wanting to do something so brash and so bold.
Right.
There are, you know, adults who have let these things enter society, and those are the people that we have to address first. And those are the issues that we have to tackle first. So, of course, the notion of, you know, the whole, you know, men and women's sports is understandable. And it's commendable for trying to tackle that because they're trying to erase women and their achievements in women's sports. But at the same time, you also have to focus on who the real target is because posting a picture of a minor isn't going to help change anything. But maybe posting a picture, well, even taking away posting a picture, but going after the people who make these things a responsible or an opportunity or, give it a platform,
Right.
it's how you actually tackle the situation.
Yeah.
And I feel like you have to keep the main thing the main thing.
Right. I agree.
No pun intended. We will take a quick break, and when we return, we'll take a look at some of the stories that made the headlines this week.
The Word of God is replete with all the information required to make anyone a huge success in life. Anyone who gets a hold of the Word of God and its teachings will definitely become what it talks about. Loveworld USA is guaranteed to reach everyone with the gospel and get them ready for the coming of the Lord. We must build people up by God's Word in the language they understand. In our world today, many people still go a long distance just to hear the Word of God due to difficulties accessing the gospel. The Word of God is being restricted, and many around the world are waging war against its circulation. But we can't be silent about this at all. We must act, and the time is now.
They share the word.
Dearest global partners, you now have an opportunity to reach out to many in these regions of the world with the Word of God through Loveworld USA. Partners, let us amplify the cause of the gospel in these cities and nations of the world having difficulties accessing the gospel. Let us satisfy the search for God's Word globally. Let us deliver to every soul their God-given inheritance in the Word. Let us expose so many out there to Loveworld USA, where we build people up by God's Word in the language they understand. Make a difference today. Sponsor Loveworld USA to unreached territories around the world. Call now to sponsor Loveworld USA. Thank you, and God bless you.
Welcome back. In a strategic move to bolster the Trump administration fiscal policies, Elon Musk, head of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, has met with Republican senators to discuss implementing federal spending cuts through legislative means. The meeting, held privately on Capitol Hill, focused on using budget recessions, an approach that allows Congress to reverse previously allocated funds to solidify DOGE's proposed reductions in government spending. Senators Lindsey Graham and Rand Paul emphasized their critical need for congressional approval to avoid potential legal and public challenges to the cuts. They advised Musk to draft a comprehensive recession package for submission to Congress, ensuring that the proposed spending would reduce legal sound and political viable. Musk, who expressed a strong willingness to work closely with lawmakers, acknowledged the importance of securing legislative backing for the initiative. He recognized that without formal congressional endorsement, the cost-cutting measures could face significant pushback, making them harder to implement. The proposed recessions are part of the administration's broader strategy to tackle the growing $2 trillion federal deficit. However, the proposal is expected to encounter resistance from both parties, with concerns over the potential negative economic effects, including job cuts within the federal government. Despite the challenges, Musk and GOP senators remain committed to pushing forward with the fiscal reform in a bid to address long-term financial sustainability. Watch this.
Mr. Musk, what was your message in there to House Republicans? What was your message in there, Mr. Musk?
There's a lot of opportunity to improve expenditures in the government, and then we're making good progress.
Should Congress have a vote on this? Should Congress have a vote on this? Will they do that?
Hell yeah.
All right, let's see if we can get Turner.
TGK? It's a lot going on with this.
Very much so. I mean, of course, just keeping everything in line. Like I mentioned earlier on the show, we don't want America to go bankrupt. That is first and foremost. And of course, hopefully the career politicians, along with, an innovative businessman like Elon Musk can find a way for Doge and the government to exist in peace, to coexist and work together for the betterment of the American people in peace, because that's all that matters first and foremost.
Yeah, that's a great insight. We've seen that the USAID has cut tremendous programs across the U.S. and across the world. So there's been talks about even having a something like a stimulus amount given to Americans from that, because they were able to, receive a lot of the funding back that were wasteful spending. We also reported on that several weeks ago, just a list of, hundreds of thousands of dollars that was just wasteful spending from American taxpayers.
Very much so. I mean, of course, stimulus payments are typically to boost the economy. It would be good to see the economy boosted on its own without payments like that, because when the government gets to printing money like that without care being taken, like we saw during the pandemic and the Biden administration, that's how you end up with inflation beyond your control. Yeah. The House of Representatives voted Thursday to censure Rep. Al Green of Texas after he was removed from President Donald Trump's joint address to Congress on Tuesday night. Green was ousted from the chamber after shouting at President Trump during his speech, disrupting proceedings. The vote on the censure was passed with the backing of 10 Democrats who joined Republicans in supporting the measure. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer from Minnesota criticized Green's actions, accusing him of contributing to the dysfunction within the Democratic Party. Before the censure could be read to Green, Democratic lawmakers gathered with Green and protested the measure by singing "We Shall Overcome" on the House floor. The disruption prompted Speaker Mike Johnson to call a recess after struggling to quell the protest. Despite the chaos, the censure resolution was still brought to a vote. In the aftermath of the censure vote, Republicans, particularly members of the House Freedom Caucus, rallied around the resolution. Representative Dan Newhouse from Washington introduced the censure measure, which was quickly brought to the floor after his maneuver to deem it privileged. Newhouse argued that Green's actions violated House rules and disrupted the purpose of the address. Democratic lawmakers were also criticized for not standing during a moment of recognition when President Trump designated the 13-year-old cancer survivor, DJ Daniel, an honorary Secret Service agent. Speaker Johnson publicly defended his decision to have Green removed, saying that his actions were unacceptable. Green, who continues to stand by his actions, was not deterred by the censure. He insisted that his protest was intentional, asserting that it was a reflection of his commitment to stand against what he viewed as the president's disregard for democratic principles. Watch this.
On this vote, the yeas are 224, the nays are 198, with 2 answering present. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The House will come to order. The House will come to order. Shh. Will Representative Green present himself to the well? By its adoption of House Resolution 189, the House has resolved that Representative Al Green be censured, that Representative Al Green forthwith present himself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure, and that Representative Al Green be censured with public reading of this resolution by the Speaker. The House will come to order. The House will come to order. What's it?
You want to let him keep doing this, or tell me
The House will come to order. Clear the well, please. Clear the well. The House has to continue its business.
You know, one of the things that I noticed from that, and at first when I heard about the story, I was almost perplexed, because when I read the headlines that you had lawmakers singing "We Shall Overcome" on the House floor, I at first thought that this was definitely a bit out of Saturday Night Live, if I'm being very honest with you. But The one thing that I will give Democrats, if for nothing, is the fact that they have audacity, just in weird ways.
The wrong way, you know.
I mean, their style of protest, because that is what it was. A protest was very eccentric, but it does lend credence to what they believe in. But of course, in that situation, like was mentioned, I mean, on the story, the fact that, and this is what I pointed out earlier, that they couldn't mend party lines for a few minutes to stand up and applaud DJ Daniels, despite whether they see him as a political pawn used by Trump to, you know, curry favor. I mean, it's the same thing when you have presidents kissing babies on their campaign tours. You know, we understand how the game works, but it doesn't mean that, you know, you're going to be upset at a baby for being kissed by a president. So it's just one of those things, you know, where you just hope that things get better between party lines to avoid these, you know, to avoid having to overcome things on the House floor during a vote for censure.
I definitely think that song was definitely out of place. You know, that song was sung during a time where a certain group of people, minorities, were oppressed in the U.S. And so it's almost like a slap in the face to sing that song.
That's a good point. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the headlines. House Republicans unveil stopgap measure to prevent government shutdown amid Democrat opposition. Trump clarifies limits on Elon Musk's role in government efficiency efforts. U.S. Department of Education unveils NDEI portal to combat discrimination in schools. Maine lawmaker censured after refusing to apologize for transgender athlete comments. And that's News Plus for today. Remember to join us same time tomorrow for more news. I'm TGK Andre.
And I'm Barbara Sam.
Good night.
And God bless you.